members of our committee and any members of the public who want to attend to join, but otherwise we'll be getting started very shortly.
Keith, you see me now? Is that?
So it's 6:02 and we do have a quorum from members of the committee, so we will go ahead and get started. Once again, welcome all. You're at the October meeting of Manhattan Community Board 5's Transportation and Environment Committee. I'm your chair, E.J. Galafarski. I'm here with my vice chair, Sam Levy. We have 3 items on our agenda tonight, 2 applications and 1 update from the Department of Transportation. In the case of each application, after some brief context, we will hear from the applicant, followed by any questions from members of the committee, an opportunity for any member of the public in attendance to speak on the application or ask a question. And then finally, the committee will go into its business session on the application, during which only members of the committee will discuss among themselves what, if any, action to take. Any action that we take tonight will subsequently be voted on by the full board of Community Board 5 at our meeting on October 14th. Anyway, without further ado, the first application on our agenda this evening is an application by HJ Opco LLC for an intercity bus stop. Is the applicant in attendance with us tonight? Okay. I saw Patrick Convin raise his hand on video. Thank you. Before we get started, some members of the committee did some diligence on this application. Nancy and Kathy, would you be able to give us some context before we hear from the applicant?
Yeah, I would just like to say that I just wanted to go over what our stated position is on Community Board 5. Thank you, EJ. We are sure behind the redevelopment of the Port Authority bus terminal, and that needs to take these intercity buses off the street. And it looks like that may happen, but in the meantime, we don't have a blanket policy denying bus stop applications, mainly because we know that Department of Transportation does not generally take what we say to be the end all for our opinion. And they oftentimes grant the bus stop applications no matter what our position is. Our policy in the past is to review the location as closely as possible and either sign off on the location or suggest a different one. And DOT, again, EJ pointed out, does take our opinion into consideration of the location. And we can certainly discuss options as a committee, but that's our general policy. So I just wanted, did I convey that correctly, EJ?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right, Nancy.
Okay.
Long term, Long term, we think all of these all these inner city bus stops should be off the streets the way they are. You know, in Boston, they pick up at South Station. In Washington, they pick up at Union Station. And we think that is long term absolutely what should be happening on the west side of New York as well. In the meantime, we work with what we got and what allowance DOT is willing to make in locating these bus stops.
Okay, so I just wanted to say that there are two locations. Both on Lexington Avenue, which to my mind and my reconnaissance, these are narrower sidewalks than other streets and avenues running north-south in Manhattan. One is at 482 Lexington Avenue between 47th and 46th, an extremely traffic congested location. The other one is in 722 Lexington Avenue, is between 58th and 59th Street. Again, an extremely congested part of the city in terms of traffic. And we'll hear from HJ LLC. But my understanding is that these are buses that will be packing suitcases underneath the bus. So it takes time to load. I'd like to know about the loading times. And there seems to be 6 pickups daily at each location. So Kathy, do you have anything you want to add on what you thought about this application?
Nancy, you covered it all. Thank you.
Okay, great. Okay, I guess we're ready then, EJ.
Okay, thank you, Nancy and Kathy. With that, Patrick, I don't know if you're taking the lead from HJ. You are still muted.
There we go. My apologies. Thank you very much. Can you see me okay then?
Yes.
Yep. Okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for the time to present to you. Some of you look familiar. I've been before Community Board 5 many times, but it is a very small time that we actually, as Hampton Jitney, HJ OPCO, I need to preface, is part of Hampton Jitney. And Hampton Jitney Incorporated has been operating regular route service, part of the National Transit Database, since 1974. The particular route along Lexington begins at 96th Street and goes down to 41st Street. And what has occurred in Reach Development, you've got a little slice there. Most of the activity is Community Board 6 and 8, which I go before much more often than you guys. But we have met before, and I've attended a number of meetings, and I certainly respect it being one of the former franchise bus guys in New York City with my offices in Midtown. Fully understand, what's occurred and what you face in Community Board 5. The residents of the Upper East Side and Midtown South access the regular route services of Hampton Jitney on Lexington Avenue, who acquired a company called Hampton Luxury Liner last year. Before that, the name of the company was 7 Bus and several other names. But they acquired essentially a competitor who was operating 4 to 8 on an average of 6 on a seasonal basis at a location of 482 Lexington Avenue. Luggage is, for the most part, at the Hampton Jitney, a carry on, carry off, and gets in and out very quickly. And this particular stop has been utilized for approximately 15 to 20 years. This is not technically a new, it is definitely a new stop for the corporation that Hampton Jitney is in the process of working with DOT. They've already acquired the assets of the company Hampton Luxury Liner, and HJ OPCO is the applicant, and it's wholly 100% owned and operated by Hampton Jitney Incorporated. So there is no difference in maintenance, scheduling, reservations, et cetera. All reservations, they have several apps now because HLL had a Hampton Luxury Liner, had this bus stop and been operating there, and other predecessor companies, I'd say 15 to 20 years. I've been in the bus business all my life. I'm familiar with this spot. I live on the Upper East Side. I travel this on a regular basis, visit these particular areas. We work in coordination with the MTA. We are part of the system in New York City. This is part of the intercity bus permit system as a result of the August 2013 implementation of the intercity bus permit system. It carries the residents of the East End and the East Side and the West Side and Central Business District, where you are, out to points in Long Island. This is part of regular route service. This is not similar to other intercity bus permit systems that you've been dealing with, nor is it, in quotes, a new stop. In fact, it's a seasonal stop, so it only operates April to October. And recently, it's only would be operating 4 times a day, not necessarily 6 is a max. But I wanted to be brief with that. It is on Lexington Avenue, where the regular route, for those of you who know the route of Hampton Jitney is, Hampton Luxury Liner duplicated some of that when they competed with Hampton Jitney. Now, Hampton Luxury Liner is one of the companies that was acquired by Hampton Jitney / HJ Opco, same company, operations. And that sort of is a snapshot. I could talk a few more minutes of it, but I'd be open for questions because I'm familiar with the dynamic of the location. And I am extremely familiar and sensitive to your concerns and your sensitivities in your particular community board. And frankly, I've defended them many times in various areas because I work with all the bus companies who are the legitimate legacy carriers here in New York City. There's a lot of other fellows who are bad actors and not part of the American Bus Association, of which I am, and we are as Hampton Jitney, HGAPCO, and also I'm a member of the Bus Association Board of Directors here in New York State and the Bus for NYC Coalition, because as private operators, we are part of the public transit system and want to use the most efficient vehicle possible, which is a bus, on a regular route service. And that regular route service, in this case, on this particular route, is Lexington Avenue and has been for many years. On that, I won't duplicate what I just said. I think I summarized it. I did have a brief conversation with your district manager earlier today, made the call to explain also who's who about that this is an older stop. And please, AJ and the rest of this committee to present it to you right now. I'm open for questions, unless you'd like me to add a little bit more. Colleen, want me to add a little bit more? Is there anything more? This is a follow-up to your office's presentation. Did that pretty much?
Thanks, Patrick.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. No, that's really helpful context and history. So just a couple of clarifications. These two locations, as laid out in the application, Lex at 46th and 58th, if I'm not mistaken, those were both existing stops previous.
Exactly.
And they were
20 years.
And they were okay. And they were licensed and approved by DOT for the old operator, which has now been acquired by Hampton Jitney, which is what's necessitating you to reapply essentially for those locations. Okay. Thanks. When how long have those two locations operated under the previous operator? Do you know the range of years?
The most recent operator, there was a series of operators who waved the flag and had different corporations that bought out the different ownerships and operations, contrary to Hampton Jitney. That is the same family-owned operations. The most recent one, I'm going to ask Colleen, help me out, maybe 3 or 4 years, Mark?
3 or 4 years ago, yeah. Hi, EJ, it's Colleen from DOT. I just want to add something that's important is that when we're looking at these locations, we try to, we look very closely at the land use and what the parking regulations are, and of course, what the traffic is on that particular street. And what's important to note is that this is going to be a shared stop with, I believe, New York City Transit Bus. We also look to make sure that their schedule do not conflict with the New York City Transit schedule. So, it's safer for them to pull up and utilize the New York City Transit as opposed to, pulling up at a different curb, where the regulation is different as well.
Yeah, that's helpful, Colleen. Thanks. And just Colleen, from your perspective, these are existing stops as well, meaning that from DOT's calculus, there are not new bus stops with new bus pickups ending up in the district.
That's correct. Yeah.
Yep, that's helpful. Got it. Okay. Well, I mean, assuming that they're existing stops, was there a COVID gap during which there have not recently been pickups there? When was the last time that the last operator was operating pickups there?
May of this year was the the acquisition of the HLL. We call it HLL internally, but it's Hampton Luxury Line. You may remember and they had started, as Colleen's familiar with, we spent a lot of time together trying to work it out. They did a good job trying, but they had to, especially with COVID, they had to stop, and they sold their assets to Hampton Jitney Incorporated, which is the Lynch family, which is HJ Opco, also same company.
And,
Okay.
and Patrick, if I'm not mistaken, there's no luggage, right? For
Yeah, it's rare when there's any luggage in these particular
Right.
locations. You know, it's available in the event somebody brings it up, but for the most part, it's the carry-ons, especially
It's
luxury
carry-on,
line stuff.
Okay. Thanks. Again, these being existing stops that have operated for years and not adding volume or pickups to the district, I don't have that many questions. Any questions from any other members of the committee? Either the folks who did diligence or anyone else? Not seeing a lot of questions. Like I said, these being existing stops for many years and being, frankly, the old operator was a known operator and the new operator is a known operator. I don't have that many questions here. If there are no other questions from members of the committee, I will, at this point, throw things open to any members of the public. If anyone has any comments or questions as members of the public, please, at this point, use the raise hand feature to indicate that you'd like to speak. Announce yourself and your affiliation, and we'll ask you to keep your comment or question to 2 minutes or less. And again, if you'd like to speak at all, please do raise your hand now. I'm seeing one raised hand from CN. CN, you are allowed to unmute yourself and speak at this point.
Yes, just a quick question. I was wondering when the bus drivers will be having their lunch breaks or not on shift, where will the buses be parked in the neighborhood? Like, what will they be using as a layover stop or anything like that?
Good question. These drivers are coming in from the East End, carrying passengers. There are 2 or 3 layovers up at 97th Street, right off the FDR. You can go up and look at them by the hospital area. And that is one of the most popular stops. Sometimes there's another bus company in there blocking us. So the drivers will go down the block there, but it's that stretch on 97th off FDR is the primary area. If they have an issue, they come up around 3rd and come back, and they're on 2nd further up in the dead zone and up by the sanitation department where there's a trucking zone. So there's what we call, and we work with DOT on this, called dedicated layover zones, and they're marked up there.
Thank you.
They're not stopping on Lex to go to lunch.
Thank you.
Well,
Okay, thanks very much for the question. I guess I'll check one more time to see if there are any other questions, but not seeing any more hands from any members of the public. I'll do one final check to see if there are any further questions from members of the committee. But once again, not seeing any. Thank you to Colleen and Patrick. At this point, we'll kind of go into our committee's business session at this point and discuss the application. I'll just reiterate at the top that we've always had kind of very grave reservations about adding new curbside bus stops to the district, but with the caveat that these are existing bus stops with existing operators, and this really will not in any way change the status quo of what we see on the streets. This to me seems pretty straightforward. I guess I'm curious whether there are any other questions kind of on our overall policy, or whether or not there are any general comments. Yeah, Sarah.
I'm just thinking, having gone to the Hamptons, not recently, don't people who go carry their luggage? Don't they have second homes there or summer homes, summer shares there. I was a little skeptical when it was quickly alleged that no, there's no stopping for loading suitcases, or they're minimal. Any other thoughts on this from people in attendance?
Yeah, I mean, well, I guess my thinking was that that they probably still have luggage, but it's most likely carry-on luggage, which is otherwise.
Right.
I'm actually not familiar with the coach itself, but you know, if there's Patrick, is there like overhead storage on the bus?
Yes, there is, and I'd like to bring up that, and this particular stop is what we call a minimal stop. And it's seasonal. It's very minimal. But the majority of the people, although July and August people go to the beach and go in summer shares, Hampton Jitney operates 365 days a year in public transit, contributing to the transit database, carrying commuters who go back and forth, whether they be the carpenters, the lawyers, the accountants, the grandmas, the cousins, the students. That's it. Could go on and on. But it's not just everybody going to the beach.
All right. Okay. Thanks, Patrick.
Popular
yeah, I think Sarah.
Now. Popular conception.
Thanks, Patrick. So yeah, I think Sarah. It's not impossible that they might do loading underneath the bus, but you know, it seems to me that there are a lot of ways to load to bring your luggage onto the bus, and that seems to be what happens most of the time.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, Nancy.
So you use the term seasonal. Can you define what you mean by seasonal? What does that mean exactly?
In this particular route, and because it's the HLL system that is now being integrated into the bigger, broader Hampton Jitney system, similar to a Greyhound system nationwide, but this is a small regional local service. The service will end on Columbus Day, which is 2 weeks from now. It will re-up after Easter in April, and it'll operate 4 to 8 times a day, average maybe 6 if the demand belongs. So it's minimal compared to the other parts of the system, which operate millions of passengers between New York City and Long Island all year long.
I have a question now for DOT. Does the permit for this bus to stop there, does it put in that it's seasonal or it's year round? The permit is for year round, right?
It's for year round.
Yes. So, okay. So we shouldn't take into
Colleen,
consideration it's only seasonal because it could become year round, right?
I think that's probably the case with all permits. Are there any bus stop permits that are only recognized seasonally, Colleen?
No, it's year round, but the operation for the operator is seasonal. But we issue permits that's year round. I mean, I understand the difference between seasonal and year round, but given their schedule, we issue permits that are all year round. But I'll confirm that. I'll confirm that with our bus stop management, but I'm pretty sure it's year round.
Yep, thanks. And Colleen, is the number of pickups per day is it equivalent to the number of pickups that we were seeing at these existing stops already?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Nancy, did you have any other comments?
Well, the letter from
questions?
DOT says 6 stops, 6 daily drop-offs and pickups at each of the locations, but now the applicant says it could be 8. Just curious. Is the permit for 6 or for 8?
It's
the current schedule is 4.
Patrick, I'll just defer to Colleen on this.
I'm sorry.
I don't want to speak on behalf of Patrick, but the information we were given, it was 6.
Okay.
Okay, Patrick, do you want to expand?
I stand corrected. When I went over it with management, the schedule varies. It's 6 because currently they pulled back on some of the services because of ridership demand. So it was down to 4, and that was my recent information. My apologies if I didn't see the paperwork that says 6. So I'll stick to 6 and leave it like that. But the schedule would change. It could change to be 4.
Okay.
What the application says, what the letter from DOT says is there will be 6 daily drop-offs and 1 drop-off every 2 to 3 hours. I don't know if that.
I think That's
And then
the
there's
first
6
one.
daily pickups and then 1 drop off every 2 to 3 hours. Under
So once
722
again,
Lexington. I'm just
we're
curious.
technically in a comment period here. Yeah. No, I think it's a good point to bring up, Nancy. I just want we're technically in a comment period here, so I just want to make sure that that we're not kind of doing crosstalk. Colleen, the way that the application is structured, does that mean that there would be at most 6 pickups in a given day? The operator couldn't go above that if they wanted, right?
So I think Patrick can confirm that, but my my take on this is that it's 6 pickups per day. I mean, I think we were talking about the frequency. Patrick, I mean, can you
Correct.
elaborate on that?
Yes, thank you, Colleen. It's accurate to describe it, that it's the frequency of the stops. So the schedule changes periodically, and schedules usually change seasonally, winter, spring, summer, fall, et cetera. That's the general four categories. I don't have the current schedule in front of me, but I know it was down to 4. I was told. I just verified that earlier today. But yes, it's got to do with frequency. It's not a hard, fast, 9 o'clock could be changed to a 9:30, or, a 10 a.m. pullout would be changed methodically for the deployment and allocation of equipment and equipment utilization of drivers' hours, et cetera, and/or ridership demand.
But the operator would not be able to suddenly start doing 12 pickups a day, like a pickup every hour. Correct?
Exactly.
Unless we submit it to a DOT for their review and approval.
Yeah.
Which
And-
this particular area is very minimal for the last 20 years. It's not a high residential area. It's closer, to Midtown, which is more. It's just not, doesn't have the numbers.
And should there be an increase in the pickups or drop-offs, we would have to come before the community board and inform you of it, just so you know.
Right.
Okay, thank you. Nancy, does that make sense?
I just wanted to clarify because we're going to be writing a resolution and we want to make sure that we have it accurately stated. That's all.
Absolutely,
so Kathy's
yeah.
writing the resolution.
Yeah.
So that's really why I was asking. I'm not trying to be
No.
difficult.
These are important, fabulous questions, and I think the best way to interpret the 6 is as a maximum at this point. And if they were to ever, they can scale down from that if they want to. If they wanted to exceed it, they would have to come back to us. Thank you for the comments, and thank you for the explanation from folks. So yeah, for the committee, our resolution that we end up crafting will contain all of this criteria and our understanding of it, and make our approval contingent on everything that we have sort of just discussed here. That it's based on our understanding that the application is for 6 maximum per day. And at certain locations, and obviously contingent on our understanding that these are existing locations and existing pickups, frankly, and that we're not getting new pickups on our street. Yeah, and we can even throw in language about the coming Port Authority bus terminal as well. Any other comments from members of the committee as we consider this? Yeah, Nancy.
I would add that it's a known operator. Okay.
Yes, indeed. Known stops, known pickups, and a known operator. I think that's very important because we know that they're a known quantity and that they understand the rules of the road. Any other comments from members of the committee? Any other criteria that we think should be included in a resolution? Otherwise, I think for all the reasons that we have said, this seems pretty straightforward, and it sounds, to me at least, like we probably don't have any objections to this. In that case, do I have a motion from anyone on the committee?
So moved.
Thank you, Matthew. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. In that case, the committee will take it to a vote. And we will start with Zach Behor.
Yes.
Thank you. Sarah Dowson,
Yes.
Nancy Gashow,
Yes.
Matt Hartman,
Yep.
Kathy Kang,
Yes.
Megan Leone,
Yes.
Maki Livesey,
Yes.
Noah Stern,
Yes.
Ryan Whalen,
Yes.
George Hikalis, George? We will come back to George. Joel Maxman.
Yes.
Yes.
Sam. Oh, thank you, George.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Joel. Sam Levy.
Also, yes.
Yes, as well.
And I'm a yes. Did I miss anybody? Okay, well, that passes. Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, Colleen, for your help.
Thank you all.
We'll write up a resolution and it'll go before the full board on October 14th. You're welcome to join that meeting. You know, all members of the public in attendance have 2 minutes to speak on any topic that they like, or you certainly don't have to if you don't want to. But thank you for your attendance this evening.
Thank you all.
Okay.
Have a great day.
Thanks very much.
Appreciate it. And thank you for all you do.
Thanks, Patrick.
Thank you. Thank you. Gotta jump
Thank
through
you.
for, stop video.
Okay, with that, we will move on to the second agenda item of the evening, which is a revocable consent application for a sidewalk installation at 220 Fifth Avenue. And to start with, I believe we'll get some context from committee member Ryan Whalen. Ryan, are you here?
I'm here and ready to go.
There you are. There you are on my Brady Bunch screen. Thanks. Can you tell us a little bit about what you've learned about the application?
Sure. As mentioned by EJ, this is an application to the Department of Transportation for a new revocable consent for a sidewalk installation at 220 Fifth Avenue. So for context, this is at the northwest corner of Fifth Avenue and 26th Street, and the proposed installation would be installed on both the Fifth Avenue and 26th Street sides of the building. The proposal is specifically to install electrical sockets and the associated conduits that would power lighting that would accent the first and second floors of the building. And as you can see from the drawings that were included in the packet, these installations would happen below the surface and at the surface of the sidewalk. But certainly I encourage the committee to ask questions to most fully understand the installation itself and what it would look and feel like. I think an important point also to keep in mind here is that the site is located in the Madison Square North Historic District. The lighting element itself, actually, as in the light projection onto the building, would go before LPC at a later point in the process. This application that we're looking at tonight is specifically and only about the installation of the electrical components that would go in the sidewalk that would power said lighting, but it's important to understand that that is something that would come later on in the process. Also, because this is something that traditionally, in my time in the committee, we haven't seen a lot of these. I wanted to take a moment to read briefly from the DOT website on what a revocable consent is, so we all have that context. Just to quote a couple of quick paragraphs, a revocable consent is the grant of a right to an individual or organization to construct and maintain certain structures on, over, or under the inalienable property, streets or sidewalks of the city. Generally, revocable consents are granted for a term of 10 years, at the end of which time they may be renewed. As the name implies, the city retains the right to revoke a revocable consent at any time. Revocable consents are generally for the sole use and benefit of the applicant, who in most cases is required to own or lease the property that is benefited by the structure. A revocable consent cannot be issued for the purpose of generating revenue. The revocable consent cannot be sublet, assigned, or transferred without the prior written approval of DOT. And just to say, there's a long list of types of improvements, private improvements that are eligible for revocable consents that are on the DOT website. This is one of those, but it ranges everything from cellar doors to flagpoles to parking lots and more, which we're only looking at one here today, but just for this committee's reference, there is a broad range that could theoretically come to us when it comes to revocable consents. So with that, that's my intro, and hand it over to the applicant.
That was a fabulous intro, Ryan. Thank you very much. With that, we will hand things over to the applicant, who I believe is Fernando, or
yes.
anyone else who may be joining.
Fernando, the client is also present in the meeting. Thank you, everybody, for the time. I just want to, I guess the presentation was very good, so I have very little to say, but I just want to say that this historic building, this beautiful building, built in 1912 in the neo-Gothic style, it's a building that we all, in New York should be proud of. And we would like to see it not only through the day, but also at night. The proposal is really emphasize the beautiful ornaments of the ground floor and the second floor. We also had a proposal that Landmarks reviewed for lighting the building from the second floor cornice up, and to highlight the building as a whole. In this particular case, and the request we're having with DOT for this revocable consent is basically to install a conduit, a 1.5 inch conduit, which will be, of course, embedded in the concrete underground. It's about 7 inches underground, to actually power LED lights that will be flashed with the sidewalk, and will be installed about 9.5 to 10 inches on West 26th Street facade from the property line. And in the case of Fifth Avenue, will be installed about a foot from the piers, which is about 2'2" from the actual property line. There's nothing else to it. It's just basically 14 lights. The conduit is 172 feet long on both, taking both exposures. And there will be 5 lights on Fifth Avenue and the rest on 26th Street.
Thank you, Fernando. A couple kind of, I have just a couple quick follow-up questions, and then I'll open things up to the committee. Just to help us visualize, the lights as proposed will be totally flush with the sidewalk such that anyone can walk on top of them, correct?
That's correct. The pictures are walkable, yes. So it will be flush with the concrete.
Okay, thank you. And from along the width of the sidewalk, sorry, I'm holding up my hands and trying to put it in the camera so you can see. Along the width of the sidewalk, from street to building, at what location along the width of the sidewalk would the lights, about how far out from the building would the lights be installed?
Okay, so the sidewalk, so it's different on either exposure, but let's talk first about 26th Street. The sidewalk is approximately 10'6" in width from the property line to the curb. The conduit will be installed centered 9.5 inches. The edge of the light will be 9.5 inches from the property line. The can itself is 5 inches, which is the visible portion with a rim. And then, of course, you leave 8'9" to the sidewalk, to the curb. So it's very close to the building. It's intended just to light wash the facade. So it's very, very close to the building. It's not in any way encroaching or in the middle of the sidewalk or anything. It's very, very close to the face of the building.
Got it. Okay. Is it similar on the other facade as well?
It is, but because the piers on Fifth Avenue are protruding from the property line slightly more, we were forced to push the conduit about 2 feet, 2'2" to be exact. So the light will stay, about 10 inches or 12 inches from the pier. But the piers are thicker on Fifth Avenue, so they protrude a little more. So and that's the reason we needed to push it a little further. But again, from the building, the sense will be that they always more or less 10 inches from the face of the building, right? Because the piers stick out a little more.
Okay. Thank you, Fernando.
You're welcome.
If you didn't have anything else you wanted to add at this point, we will turn things over to members of the committee who can ask any questions that they might have. I'll just start by, Ryan already gave us a kind of fabulous introduction to both this application and the revocable consent concept. And I'll just emphasize, we really don't get many of these as a transportation committee. We've gotten one or two over the last couple of years. The last one, the last couple, I believe, referred to a below ground vault that was extending beyond the property line, in which case no one on the street saw much of anything, but the basement of the building was extending, for technical reasons under the sidewalk, which is public space. So anytime anything that is considered public space is going to be used used up by a private entity for any reason, it requires that revocable consent because it's essentially them making use of space that belongs to everybody, and that's why it comes before us. We don't have a lot of precedent to go on, but it certainly seems like we should assess whether the public is losing anything by the granting of this consent, or whether it really doesn't affect members of the public much at all. And certainly something closer to the building and flush with the sidewalk that no one's going to trip over or anything like that is better than something sticking way out in various ways, from my perspective at least. But at this point, any members of the committee who might have questions about the revocable consent concept or specific for the applicant, feel free to raise your hand at this time. Yeah, Matt.
I wonder if the applicant could just talk about the way that I think about this is you have light that there's positive benefits where something more well lit could improve safety. There's sort of cost that, I don't know, light pollution sort of theoretically. Just can you talk about are the lights fully used? You described them as against the building, or shining on the building. Basically, the only people the light is pointing at is the building itself. Is that a good characterization of what we should picture?
That is exactly right. We are wall washing the facade, so the light needs to be close to the building. So it shines towards the building, and being so close is not going to interfere with, cars driving around or people walking. You've seen some of these. I mean, Grand Central Stations has some of these, and some of the the landmark buildings in New York have these type of lighting. We just think that it's just going to improve the night the way that the building looks at night. Basically, that's what we're trying to enhance.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, thanks, Matt. Maki.
Thank you, EJ. Just two questions. Following up on what Matt just asked about, are there any residential buildings on the 26th Street side that might be impacted by the light, despite the fact that it's shining on the building itself? And I only ask the question because I have a similar situation across the street from my building, and it's quite bright in the evenings, even though it's shining on the building itself. And the second question that I had is a temporary situation, but will there be any closure to that sidewalk space while those lights are being installed, please?
Fernando, can you speak to those questions?
Yeah, sorry, I was actually muted. Good question. So there is no residential building that will be affected. You know, we are at the ground level. Everything is commercial all the way to the second floor, everywhere in the area. So the first question is, the answer is no. And I didn't understand the second. Could you please ask that question again?
Of course. The second question was regarding any temporary disruption for sidewalk users on 26th Street while they're being installed.
Great. So in order for us to install the conduit, we will actually have to create a fence, which will, by DOT standards, will actually extend 3 feet from the property line. And this will be will allow enough room for us to do the work that we need to do. Because the work itself is very small, we are installing a small conduit. And you know, like Ryan said before, you know, the lights will be installed at the second phase. It's only the conduit, so it will take you know, a brief time to actually cut the concrete, install the light and patch it. Install the conduit and patch it.
So
And would you
Fernando, just to
estimate
follow
that-
up on that. Oh, no, please, Maki, go ahead.
No. I think we're asking the same question. Is when you say short time, would you say that that's in weeks or months?
We have not gotten a contractor to look into these, but Brendan, if you are listening to this, has Taylor sent this out to the electricians for a schedule? Because I wasn't.
Absolutely. Yeah, you guys can hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
We can hear you.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Brendan Ince. I represent the owner of the asset, the owner of the building. Yeah, we have spoken to contractors, and the whole process between chopping, laying in the conduit, installing the light fixtures from start to finish, in terms of when the fence is going to be up and when the fence will be taken down, will be within 5 working days.
Thanks, Brendan.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Maki. Any other questions from members of the committee? Not seeing any other questions at this point. We will throw things to members of the public. If you're a member of the public, please and you have a question or comment at this point, please use the raise hand feature at this time, and we will go through everybody who has a raised hand. Once again, please state your name and any affiliation, and try to keep your comment to 2 minutes. We will start here with Jim Wright. Jim, you can unmute. Jim, don't know if you're trying to speak right now, but you can unmute yourself if you're able.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, my name is Jim Wright. I'm a resident of Community Board 5 in the vicinity of 27th and Broadway, so I am familiar with the building and the area in general. 2 comments procedurally. I find it odd that an application would come like this, that's a logistical question about a design prior to the design, the approval of the design by Landmarks. It seems backwards. I would think that the design would be reviewed, any adjustments, if it is approved, would be made prior to requesting outlets in the sidewalk, so that seems odd. Also, in the past, these kind of applications typically would have a drawing, a site plan, so that all these questions that were asked could be clarified, and that there's a record, a clear record of what is being requested and what may or may not be approved. As far as the substance of the application, I have two comments. One, I agree with the question earlier about light pollution. I think it's a real problem in the city, and it really needs to be thought of very carefully from the point of view of the perhaps benefits, possible benefits that may come out of this in relation to the possible environmental impacts. So again, I think it's premature to be looking at a utility hookup. The second is a more broad observation about landmark buildings and lighting. There really is nothing, to my mind, that's historical about lighting the facade of a building like this in a way that highlights the perhaps commercial value of the building, the sort of highlighting the building itself outside of the context of the rest of the neighborhood. So again, without seeing really clear design drawings and having a clear out discussion of that, I think this is highly premature to be considering this application. And I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Jim, for I think both of those points, which are well spoken. Colleen, I'd like to follow up on one of those, if I can. Can you speak procedurally to why the revocable consent application is coming to us this month with an actual design coming to Landmarks, presumably in a future month, instead of vice versa?
You know what, EJ, I don't have much information about this particular application. I would have to follow up with our revocable consent division. I mean, I would imagine that, you know, much of the questions that were asked were addressed. But, you know, I can't tell you anything more that I don't know of about it. I'm not familiar with this particular application.
Thanks. Fernando, do you have any information on why we would be getting, why Community Board 5 would be getting the revocable consent application before the landmark, before the design goes before Landmarks?
We were instructed to do it this way, not I don't know the particular reason why. What I have to say though is that Landmarks already reviewed lighting to the building from the building, and they approved that application already. We discussed lighting levels from the second cornice up, and the mansard lighting. All of that was filed already and approved. You know, Landmarks will not have objections to the sidewalk lighting because it doesn't really affect the building. The only reason why Landmarks would not approve it is if the community or DOT will oppose to this. So I'm not sure why it is a concern, really. You know, Landmarks will protect the building.
Yeah, I had a slightly different question for you, Fernando, right now. But when you say are you saying that Community Board 5 has previously approved, Community Board 5's Landmarks Committee has previously approved lighting the building that is attached to the building?
I'm not sure if the community saw the lighting. We filed it with Landmarks.
There's a difference between the city's Landmark Preservation Commission and Community Board 5.
Yeah, no. I'm talking about
specifically here.
I'm talking about the City Landmarks Commission. I'm not talking about the community.
Okay. Yeah, we're asking specifically, you know, our understanding, and you know, I sort of defer to both, you know, Colleen and folks from DOT, as well as our district manager, Marisa. Our understanding is that this even if we approve, even if T&E approves and Community Board 5 endorses a revocable consent for this, the changes will still need to come back to Community Board 5 from a landmarks perspective, and presumably go back to LPC as well. Marisa, Colleen, can anyone shed light on this process?
I mean, my understanding, EJ, is that, you know, the underground, the under sidewalk work just runs through DOT rather than LPC, and that's the work that has to happen first. But, you know, it's just sort of a typical city situation where the left hand isn't speaking to the right hand.
No, yeah. I guess my question is straight up, does this still need to come back to Community Board 5's Landmarks Committee to approve the design prior to that design going back to LPC?
I was told that this would go through Landmarks. So I'm not sure if that means it necessarily requires a community board review. Not everything does that goes through Landmarks. But I was told that would be the process.
By who did that information come from?
From the DOT revocable consent folks.
I see. Certainly it seems to me like it would either have to have previously gone before LPC or will subsequently have to go through LPC. I don't know if LPC has previously approved lighting the building from, a fixture attached to the building. I don't know if they would need to approve again if the lighting got moved to the sidewalk. Do you, Marisa?
It's a good question. I'm not sure. I would think that any change to the lighting would need to be approved by LPC, particularly where it's placed to how it's placed. That seems like that would fall under LPC's purview. That's something that they would care about greatly.
Yep.
But I don't know what the original ruling was, so I'm not sure in this case. But I would imagine it would need to. If they're changing the positioning of the lighting, I would imagine that that's something LPC would want to hear.
Okay, thank you. I think we'll follow up more with this when we have our business session, because there's a lot to sort of figure out here in terms of jurisdiction and really what we're weighing in on tonight and what we anticipate Community Board 5 and LPC to have to weigh in on going forward. So that having been said, I don't think we're done talking about these topics at this point. But thank you for the questions, Jim. I think they've been illuminating here. Next up, we have CN. Please, since your name isn't provided in your Zoom name, please identify yourself and any affiliation that you might have, and then go ahead and make your comment. You can now unmute yourself.
Hi, it's Charles, resident in
Charles,
Community Board.
I'm sorry, can we get your last name as well?
Nye. From Community Board 5, a resident. So I have a couple of questions. I was wondering, are these lights going to be solid colors? Are they going to be multiple colors? Are they able to do patterns or any flashing or strobing effects? And is it going to be as powerful to light up the whole front of the building or just halfway up the building? I also would like to know, where is the construction equipment going to be placed? Is it going to be parked on the street? Is it going to be on the sidewalk? I'd like to also know, how are you going to protect the historical building from dust and debris from the drilling as you drill into the sidewalk? And I feel that disrupting this very busy intersection, which is busy with tourists, people going to Madison Square Park, and it's a very busy area. I find it a bit, there's going to be an inconvenience to all these people just to place a few lights to close down the sidewalk, and it's already a bright area anyway as it is. So I just have a few of those questions. And also, how long will the drilling be? Will it be from what time to what time? As we know, drilling is very noisy and very loud. It's already a loud city, as we know. Thank you.
Thanks for the questions.
Thanks,
I believe that the the fence installation will muffle some of the noise. As Brendan said before, the electrician has said that it will take about 5 business days for this conduit to be installed. There is no blasting or any type of heavy noise or heavy machinery to this. We are just saw cutting, a very small sort of trench to install the conduit at this time, and then patching the concrete back. So we don't expect massive amount of debris or a lot of dust to generate. Now, of course, it's a construction process, and some dust will be generated, I believe, by the saw cutting of the sidewalk. The contractors will have to make provisions because there are stores around the ground floor of the building, so we can't disturb their operations, and the work needs to be phased correctly. But again, it's only 5 business days, and the work will be protected by a fence, which is 8 foot as per DOT standards, which actually sticks about 3 feet from the building. Only temporary, of course. And yeah.
Can you speak to some of the other questions that Charlie had, such as whether any construction equipment will need to be stored nearby, or whether it will all be inside that fencing that you mentioned?
The work is done with hand tools. The tools are not machines or heavy machinery, so just hand tools that will be behind that fence for the time of the installation.
Okay, thank you. And can you speak to any colors or patterns in the lighting, or whether it'll be, a standard white light all the time? Can you kind of speak to that?
Yeah. So the lights, the system will be a white system. We have control of the dimming. So these are LED fixtures, of course, and we are allowed to dim the temperature of the light between 1400 Kelvin to 3000 Kelvin. That is the range, which is a warm, soft white, which will enhance the facade detailing.
Okay, thanks. And any particular, you said just hand tools, so perhaps the answer is no, but any steps being taken to protect the building's facade during the days of construction?
Well, we actually we don't have construction documents prepared yet as far as the procedure for the construction, but we will make the contractors protect the building, with temporary dust protection. It also the storefronts need to be allowing people to come into the stores. So the fence will not be continued. There will be sort of separations between the fences. So the work will be staged or staggered. We'll stage the work in order to maintain the functioning of the building. But we don't have any construction. We are in the process of getting this approved. Providing we get the approvals, then we will proceed to actually do a little more of a construction operation and construction process for the contractors.
Okay. Charlie, did that address all your questions, or did you have any others?
I just wanted to just one last point, which is, this is a historical building, and I think way back historically there was no lights in the sidewalk. I just think it changes the character of the building. Personally, just want to add that.
Okay. Thanks very much, Charlie, for your comments and your questions. That being all the hands that we see from members of the public, Before we go into our business session, and building on some of the questions that we've heard, I just wanted to pose one more question to Fernando. We obviously have a number of questions about jurisdiction here and the different approvals that you'll need, and we don't have specific answers, and it doesn't necessarily seem like we'll be able to get those answers tonight. So I just want to ask you, as the applicant, do you or are you planning on going back to LPC to get these changes in the illumination of the building approved?
Yes.
So you are still planning on going back to LPC?
Yes.
Okay.
We wanted, of course, Landmarks was not opposed to lighting the building. Enhancing a landmark building is something that everybody should be proud of. Half of Europe, the most beautiful cities like Paris or Vienna, they're all lighting their buildings, right? The way we are trying to do here. So I honestly, I think is something good to do. But I don't think.
To be honest, that's not the. To be honest, that's not the jurisdiction of us as the transportation committee.
Right. No, I understand. I'm trying to answer your question. So we're gonna go back to Landmark. Landmarks was supportive of these, but in terms of putting anything on the sidewalk, they would just refrain to DOT, and that's why we are here. Like I said, Landmarks will not oppose to install a conduit that is underground, that is not visible, that doesn't affect the building or anything. So.
Yeah, I don't think this is about the Landmarks Preservation Commission approving the conduit. I think our assumption currently is that you need both approvals, a revocable consent for the conduit and an LPC approval for the lighting of the building. Our assumption is that this is going to require both. Are you currently planning on applying for both?
I will have to talk to the expediters on the job to see the responses that Landmark gave them when we actually presented this part of the project. I could actually send some information back tomorrow when I talk to them.
That may end up being very helpful. Yeah, thank you. Okay. Obviously, we've got a bit to talk about here. Any other before we go into our business session? Any other questions from members of the committee for the applicant? Okay. Thanks, Fernando. With that, we will go into a business session here among the members of the committee. I'll be particularly interested to hear what some members of the committee think about our particular jurisdiction here. As I just said, and as needed, I can recognize either the applicant or DOT again if we have any further questions that we think we can get answers to tonight. I think we're dealing with, as I kind of just said, two different things, which is number one, a revocable consent for the conduit, which is not the same as asking whether there should be lighting in the neighborhood, whether the facade should be lighted, whether a historic building should be lighted. That is something that we as Community Board 5 would leave to the Landmarks Committee, and it's a different it's a different approval entirely than a revocable consent from DOT from the city. So I think we need to scope what it is that we are asked to approve here, which is using sidewalk space for a conduit. Yeah, Joel.
So as this was introduced initially, and this goes, I guess, to what you just said, I was very comfortable with saying yes to this because I thought we were kind of the tail wagging the dog, that another committee was going to look at the effect of the lighting, the effect on neighbors, all that kind of stuff. And all we were doing was saying, yeah, you can put a hole in the sidewalk and keep it there without paying. And that seemed pretty minimal based on the introduction we had. It seemed perfectly consistent with the concept of a revocable consent. Now that I'm hearing that there may not be any other community board 5 input on this, and maybe only, once we grant this, it goes to LPC and they do what they want. I'm not comfortable with it anymore. I feel like this is our only chance to address the issues that, maybe the neighbors have concerns about lighting, and think, and reflected lighting and things like that we thought might be addressed elsewhere, and now they're not going to be.
Yeah, thanks, Joel. I think those are justifiable concerns. Similarly, a lot of clarity on whether or not LPC approval is required here, and whether or not the applicant was intending to come back to CB5 to go to in front of the Landmarks Committee on a different month would be useful. And we may, because our meeting is the first meeting of the cycle, we may in fact be able to ask the applicant if they wanted to come in front of the Landmarks Committee, which meets a week from tomorrow. if indeed, if we wanted to, and if it seemed like they were open to it. So let's put a pin in that right now. Ryan.
That's really the rub of what I think here. The 4 corners of the revocable consent for the sockets and conduit, I have no concern about. And to me, my request would be that they come before the Community Board 5 Landmarks Committee in addition, and discuss this, and therefore, the way that we would structure this so as to encourage that maximally is I am open to whatever structure that might be in terms of the way we structure the resolution.
Yeah, and I was thinking the same thing. We could, as is often done by committees on CB5, write a deny unless and make the condition, that the applicant go before the Landmarks Committee next Tuesday, this very month, and that gives us the opportunity to amend our deny unless and merge it with whatever resolution that may come out of Landmarks prior to the full board meeting. Is that the kind of structure that you were thinking, Ryan?
Yes.
Yep. Thanks. Other comments from members of the committee? Even at this point, we kind of need to hear whether what we're talking about even sounds good to folks. Yeah, Maki.
Thank you, EJ. I know this is somewhat semantic, the difference between deny unless and approve with conditions, but it would seem to me that based on the original submission and the straightforwardness of the transportation aspect of it, that might be a consideration, especially if the LPC does not require a presentation. However, because there doesn't seem to be residential units on that 26th Street side, I'm not exactly sure. I thought there was a building on the cross street, but in any case, that might be an option, whether we want to be on the approve with or deny unless side of things.
Thanks, Maki. Yeah, the difference between a deny unless and an approval with conditions is entirely academic and semantic, and it entirely has to do with how our position will be interpreted by the agency that will be reading it, which in this case, the only agency that we know so far will be reading it is DOT's Revocable Consents Department. So that is who we are currently addressing with any resolution that we write. Mainly because we don't know, the applicant has offered to come back tomorrow with some more information, but we don't know whether our resolution or any position that CB5 takes is also going before LPC. So right now we're writing for DOT, and the language that we use, you know, it simply comes down to when they read it, do we want them to see that the first word is approve, or do we want them to see that the first thing they read is deny unless whatever comes after? So, you know, often that's why we will, and just for a little bit of additional context, there are committees such as public safety and quality of life that structure every single resolution, you know, even the ones they're supportive of, as a deny unless, so that the conditions are taken into account. In this particular case, you know, I think it would be justifiable because our only condition is that the applicant also come before another committee on CB5. So it's primarily a process condition to make sure that what we consider the appropriate process is being followed. Any other comments? Yeah, Matt.
Just wanted to also address the question around the residential area. So the building itself that's being lighted has no residential. Across the street on 26, so if you're standing on 26 and you're looking towards those lights, you have a building that is, just so we're aware of it, I don't think this is material, but it's 24 floors. That's 97% residential in that building that's facing it on the 26th Street side. And then the building that's facing on the Fifth Avenue side, there's also residential. It's 13 floors, which is 92% residential. My read of this application is that the lights are all pointing towards the 220 Fifth Avenue, 218 Fifth Avenue building, which is no residential. So the risk of the lights going into someone's apartment aren't strong, but wanted to just make sure that that's at least what the data on the ArcGIS says.
Thanks, Matt. So in a nutshell, there's residential across the street, but not necessarily on the same block.
Exactly.
Okay. Thanks, Matt. Nancy.
But at night, that could be an issue for people who look out on buildings. It could have a lot of reflected light. And I know buildings in my neighborhood that are under construction that are 20 blocks away keep me up at night. So I think it's a strong consideration here.
I think it's something that in general should be taken into consideration by somebody. I do wonder, you know, again, within our jurisdiction, in terms of chiming in on a revocable consent, it's not, I'm not 100% sure that it's something necessarily we should be weighing in on a transportation or sidewalk issue where it comes down to those quality of life issues. But that I suppose introduces a third committee.
It is a quality. You're right. It is quality of life.
So given Nancy's point and a bunch of the lighting has been raised a bunch, I would be supportive of us encouraging them to submit this to the Landmarks Committee if the Landmarks Committee thought that it was appropriate for them to review.
That is what I would be leaning towards at this point too. I would want to check with Marisa to find out whether we're following board process appropriately if we were to suggest that, and whether it's technically doable. Marisa, how is this sounding to you? Marisa may have stepped away. But at this point, if there aren't really any other objections from members of the committee, at this point, I kind of like to ask the applicant, Fernando, you know, given that we have a limited scope here and a lot of questions about whether or not this has been approved by LPC, is going to be approved by LPC, and whether if it goes to LPC, it'll come back to Community Board 5. Would you be willing a week from tomorrow, Tuesday the 5th of October, to visit the Landmarks Committee of Community Board 5? If indeed we were able to work that out with our Landmarks Committee?
I will talk to my client. We would have no objection to meet. Unfortunately, with such a short time, we will not be able to prepare more documents other than the documents that we already currently have. So if that is not a concern to the community board, then I would be okay to do it. If you have a standard for presentations that we need to prepare for, then 1 week will not be enough for us to work on. So I'm not sure exactly what the community board expects us to present in this short time.
I won't speak for our Landmarks Committee or Landmarks Chair. Certainly, as much information or illustration as is possible, given a landmark. You know, I'm sure you have. You pointed out that it's a landmark building. You know, certainly whatever information you can provide about the illumination changes for a landmark building to the Landmarks Committee will probably be helpful. But in addition, you know, I would say that this is totally dependent on whether or not you're able to come back to us tomorrow with more specificity about whether you are going back to LPC and when. Because our assumption at this point is that an illumination change on a landmark building does have to go back to LPC, even if for approval, even if it has been approved by LPC in the past. So that's our current assumption. But you know, if indeed the answer is no, that's the situation under which, you know, if we are to be the last word on this before it gets approved, that is the situation under which we would say we're asking you to you know, whether you have new information or not, to definitely go to before our Landmarks Committee next Tuesday, not tomorrow, but a week from tomorrow.
Mm-hmm. Okay, like I said, I'll talk to my client, but I wouldn't oppose to do it, of course.
Okay, thank you for that. Really do appreciate that. So in terms of internal to our committee, it sounds to me like where we're at this point is to say that as far as the conduit installation for any kind of approved illumination of a landmark building, we have no objection to that kind of conduit. However, we don't know if this has been approved either by LPC specifically, or whether or not it's appropriate illumination for a landmark building, according to our community board and our Landmarks Committee. So it sounds like we would you know, at this point this evening, craft a resolution that's like a deny unless, and basically say that we find the conduit to be acceptable for approved illumination of a landmark building, but we're denying unless we get more clarity that this is going before LPC or the applicant is indeed going before our Landmarks Committee as well. Yeah, Nancy.
I am very concerned about the light pollution and the precedent that it sets for our community board, in that if more building owners do this, we could be living in a very brightly lit environment, which does not allow people who have residential units to sleep at night, because light from outside prevents people from getting sleep. So I'm very concerned about that, and the fact that we don't have a committee that deals with that in our community board. I wonder if we need to notify the residential buildings adjacent to this building so that they can speak on this either for or against. I don't think we required anyone to notify any of the neighbors about this. I know it's an unusual point, but I'm thinking about this now, and it's very concerning to me.
It's true that I believe, and this predates me, but there used to be a committee dedicated to revocable consents, consents and variances, I think was the committee, that was ultimately subsumed into other committees. So I don't know like I said, I suspect the current jurisdiction will fall under something like PSQL, but I'm unsure of the precedent for installation of this kind of lighting. And I suspect that at this point, the committee probably closest to dealing with this type of situation on a regular basis, the installation of lighting, to illuminate a pretty build, any kind of building that is considered pretty in the district, is probably landmarks. So perhaps, if the applicant goes in front of landmarks, we can do that kind of appropriate posting over the next week and make sure that at least members of the community have a chance to come out and speak to it, if indeed this issue goes before landmarks. Does that sound like the best of a couple bad options right now, Nancy?
It does, but a building owner could decide to do this in not a landmark building as well. I'm concerned again about the precedent of the light pollution of so many buildings in our community board and with our residential neighbors. I'm very concerned about they're having to buy blackout shades because there's so much light reflecting off the buildings adjacent to where they live. That's my concern.
It's worth being concerned about. I don't know physically whether directed light at a building across the street really does create any kind of reflection that is ultimately coming through the residences across. I don't have an answer to whether that is a true problem or not. Sarah.
Yes, I really like Nancy's point. Residents might want to weigh in on new lighting on the street, on a building where they live, not only for light pollution, but a lot of energy use. So I really liked Nancy's point.
Thanks, Sarah. Joel?
Just in response to what you just said, I will tell you I'm surrounded by reflected light, and it definitely comes right through the window blinds. It's not directed at my building, but it's reflected off other buildings and it comes right in.
Okay. So, it does seem like we need to come in for a landing on something to do tonight. And, again, without a lot of precedent and without having really, I think, gotten, the opportunity to inform the community, and the folks in the surrounding area to speak. I don't have my suspicion, and very much want to hear from other members of the committee on this, is that our best option at this point is that deny unless route, where we make our approval for the revocable consent totally contingent on the applicant either coming back to landmarks this month or in some future month, so that landmarks not only has the opportunity to weigh in on the installation of lighting for a landmarked building, but also so the community has the opportunity to weigh in on other elements of the lighting as well. That kind of gives us more time for the community to weigh in and kind of make sure that we are bringing in folks who are more expert on what we think are some of the more consequential effects of the installation. Nancy?
We're Transportation and Environment Committee. This is an environmental issue. So I think we should weigh in on this. An environmental issue is light pollution. So I think we're in the right place here. We've just never had to talk about it before. So I think we should consider the environmental aspects of this.
Yep. Yeah, and it's a good point, and I am certainly not aware, as was stated, there are other installations like this throughout the district. I don't know who they have come to prior in the past, and I'm not sure if anyone has more information on that, on the committee. Would certainly be interested to hear if folks have a specific route to go in tonight besides a deny and last. Yeah, Matt.
Given that it's revocable consent, is there a way that we haven't seen this? This is new to us. I agree with Nancy that we're environment and that gives us the purview, and so instead of kicking it over to another committee, I wonder if what we could say is there a way for us to have a check-in to make. I don't know if that's a year from now, or if it's 6 months from now, or when it's the lighting has been installed and operated for 3 months, that we can have a check-in on whether anyone has any issue with it. So at a minimum, we can learn whether there's a problem with this for future applicants, rather than kind of create a new rule that's a denial, given that we've never seen this before.
So from your perspective, Matt, that would be an approve with a condition?
Yes.
Okay. Nancy?
In the LEED certification process, there is a way to measure light pollution, and we could look into that and maybe request the applicant tell us, quantify the light pollution that this is creating, so that maybe we could set a standard for our particular community board. I think we need to think about it more, but there are experts that know about light pollution and light pollution from exterior lighting in and around buildings.
So I agree with that. I think my question is, for this applicant, we didn't request that. And so how do we deal with sort of this applicant, and then how do we think about it going forward is my kind of question.
I think that's an important distinction, because, once again, we weren't so much able to make the applicant, provide this information in advance. Sort of weird to me that we don't have more precedent for this, because lights don't seem to be a new invention. I do think there are various things that we can
think about this kind of for what I'm thinking about the
Matt, I think I lost you there.
I think my internet connection's a bit unstable, so I'll try it once more, but if not, I'll leave it to you guys, but I'll try dialing in. I was thinking about what we did with the request for police to better monitor the biking regulations, where we were approving things and requesting, and then eventually we kind of got to the point where we said we need to make a stronger statement. And I wonder if here in our resolution we could say we are approving this, and we're also asking that future applicants, in our resolution we say we're asking that future applicants include some content around or expertise on what the lighting impact will be, and that sort of sets our precedent going forward. Would that work?
I think it does, and I think even if we were to approve this by saying that, we didn't ask for more data and we can't necessarily deny it for not having more data, we could certainly add those types of stipulations on any future applicant that's going to come before us with this type of application. I'm still worried about the fact that it's a landmark building and we might not, and our landmarks committee might not get to weigh in. I think that's a separate, I think that's a separate reason to maybe deny unless. From the light pollution situation, I'm pretty much in favor of something along the lines of what you're saying, Matt, simply because we have not had these types of, we have not been able to provide in advance that type of requirement or the need for that type of data to the applicant. So and I think if we were to combine those two positions into a resolution tonight, it would, trying to think of how this would ultimately be written as a resolution. It seems to me that we could write a resolution with a one resolved that more or less says we recommend denial of this revocable consent unless the applicant also goes before our landmarks committee or LPC at some future time. And that while we approve the concept of this type of application, we will adhere those stipulations to future applications. I think those two resolves can live alongside each other with the understanding that it's the first one and the stricter one by which all those types of standards will have to be met before that resolution can be considered and approval. Ryan, as someone who will have to help us craft this, how is this sounding to you?
This sounds doable. One more question that I just have is there's the resolve piece on the deny unless, understand that completely, and then the and or furthermore after that, understood on sort of we didn't ask for data on this point, but going forward we would look for X, Y, Z. My other question is recognizing that we will learn some more about this specific application in landmarks. Do we want an additional and statement that says that, that basically talks about the landmarks, this kind of landmarks context going forward as well? Meaning in a circumstance where this, we explicitly believe and request that anytime something like this would be impacting a landmarked building or property, that it should for sure go before either CB5 landmarks or otherwise, or do we just need to should be silent on the go forward piece of that?
That would be us kind of throwing down a gauntlet and saying in the future that we won't approve a revocable consent on a landmark building unless it's been previously approved by LPC. It certainly makes sense to me. I do wonder if for whatever reason the applicant was told to come to the to get a revocable consent first, like maybe we're creating some kind of catch-22 that's actually the opposite of what the city tells applicants to do. I don't know whether that's the situation, but what you're saying to me certainly sounds logical until someone tells us differently.
Yeah. I mean,
in terms of basic logic, I'm sort of comfortable writing that in.
Yeah, and just to say the language could either be that we won't approve it, or we could just say that we could make a comment on the order of operations here that it concerns us or something. We could tone it down from we won't if that feels better to people.
Yep. That kind of makes sense. Joel.
Just kind of in line with what Ryan just said, I don't think we need to throw down a gauntlet in terms of LPC, but in terms of, coming to the community board's landmark committee, I don't see that that's really a threat. That's part of our process, and please do that if you come to us in the future. And even for this one, assuming Marisa can arrange it in time for next week, then I think that should be, the deny unless should be come to our committee, because they're obviously going to LPC, but it's really about getting the community input on our level that I think should go into the resa in the deny unless.
I think that's a great point. We're not necessarily creating an impossible situation with city procedure by merely asking that they communicate with our landmarks committee before coming to us with a revocable consent. I mean, they can call the board office and communicate with our, district manager and committee chairs whenever they want. So it's certainly not a problem to kind of require that we get a heads up, that our appropriate landmarks committee get a heads up before any future revocable consent application. So here's where I think we're at this point. 3 kind of resolved paragraphs. It would be a deny unless this applicant about this landmark building goes before landmarks this month or at least sometime in the future. Secondly, it'll be us giving notice that we will require more data about the light pollution of any such lighting installation that requires a revocable consent coming before us in the future. I swear to God, by the end of the night, I'm not going to be able to pronounce it at all. And then thirdly, that we will, Community Board 5, will require future revocable consent applications about landmark buildings to at least reach out and potentially give notice to our landmarks committee with their landmark design in the future, so that we're not being asked to approve the technical specifications for something that really doesn't have a design. That is what I think we're crafted right now. Nancy?
Is it possible to add a sentence about our concern about the impact of light pollution on residential neighbors to this building? I think that's the residential neighbors are really important, because I think once this is installed, we might start getting complaints. And I think we really need to add that in there so people can begin thinking about that.
I think that's a great point. I think that should be added to resolve number 2 that we just referred to. And we can say that we will require more data about light pollution, and we will factor that into future revocable consent consideration, specifically because of the environmental concerns for residential neighbors. Absolutely. Maki.
Thanks, EJ. Just wanted to say I agreed with the 3 items that you laid out. I didn't know if the previous revocable consent was also having to do with lighting, because I didn't know if you wanted to make that too narrow in order to set a precedence for future.
I believe the prior ones that we've dealt with over the last couple of years did not have anything to do with lighting. They had to do with below ground vaults. So not quite the same environmental factor.
Got it. In that case,
which is to say, in those, no one above ground even knew it happened.
Got it. So in that case, I concur with the information that you laid out as is.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments in support of this particular path for our committee here, or anything else that anyone wants to add? In the absence of further comment, it sounds like this is the direction that we're going in tonight. I see a couple nods. Are there any motions to the matter?
So move.
Second.
Thank you. And a second. Thank you. So we will we'll be taking this to a vote. As mentioned, this will be a resolution that lays out the application, that denies the application unless the applicant is going before our Community Board 5 Landmarks Committee this month or sometime in the future, where we will be laying out that we will require more data about light pollution from revocable consent applications related to light installation in the future because of environmental concern for residential neighbors, and that we will require any future revocable consent applications about landmark buildings to be approved or at least in communication with our landmarks committee in the future if we're before consideration of revocable consent applications. With that, we will take this to a vote, our second vote of the evening. And we will start with Zach.
Yes.
Sarah.
Yes.
Nancy.
Yes.
Matt.
Yes.
Kathy.
Yes.
Megan.
Yes.
Maki.
Yes.
Noah.
Yes.
Ryan.
Yes.
George.
Yes.
Joel.
Yes.
Sam.
Yes.
And I am a yes. So that resolution passes. As mentioned, you know, if the applicant does indeed go in front of our landmarks committee this month, we can always change the deny unless section to an approval, assuming that they got the approval of our landmarks committee. And we'll certainly be in touch, Fernando, after you are able to circle up with your client to determine whether or not you're able to go in front of our landmarks committee next Tuesday in October, or if we are able to get more information that you'll be going in front of the LPC in the future per the resolution that we've crafted.
Okay.
So thank you for bearing with us as we deal with this new type of application that we don't see very much. It was much appreciated, and thank you for all the answers to our questions. We will, our board office will be in touch with all that scheduling as we have discussed.
Very good.
Okay, thank you. With that, we will move on to the third item on our agenda for the evening, which is a update from the City Department of Transportation on, I believe, Broadway.
Beautiful. Thanks, EJ. Hi, everyone. Emily Weidenhoff from the Public Space team at DOT. I'm joined with my colleagues, Jessica and Irene, and we are here to give you an update on what has happened and what hasn't happened since we presented our latest iteration of Broadway public realm projects to you back at the end of April at your May meeting. So between some construction coordination issues, as well as some supply chain issues, working to coordinate with Con Ed and our pedestrian signal construction, the various kind of implementations of the public space along Broadway have shifted. And so we're going to be giving you a project by project update of where we are and what you can expect on the ground in the next month or so. And then we also wanted to provide some updates based on your feedback that we heard at the meeting, everything from continued coordination with the visually impaired community, along with additional pedestrian space and some observations related to the bike lane treatments in the Garment District. So with that, we're going to go through each project, and we're going to start with Flatiron, and my colleague Jessica is going to walk us through.
Thanks, Emily. So yeah, just to kick it off with Flatiron, the space has been largely complete since August 9th. It's been totally operational. We do have a couple of markings to fill in, but again, the space has been largely operational since early August, both the shared space and the plaza space. Next slide. So one of the big next steps is building on our sort of past outreach with the blind and visually impaired community. We are going to the monthly moped meeting on October 1st to talk through shared streets and some of the treatments that we are using to make shared streets more legible to, in particular, the blind and visually impaired community. And again, this image is showing a workshop we held in 2017 after we implemented the first shared street at Flatiron to talk through the treatments we use there with cane users. And then again, sort of building on our larger Broadway visioning efforts and really building also on what we heard from you guys back in April, that the area really needs more pedestrian space and more public space, and building on the success of the open streets, of the Flatiron open streets. We're working with the Flatiron bid to implement some pop-up plazas between 25th and 27th. With that, I'm gonna actually hand it over to Kurt to talk through the timeline and the site plans.
Sure thing. Good evening, everyone. Kurt Cavanaugh here from the Flatiron 23rd Street Partnership. Thank you for having us tonight. As working with Jessica and Emily and the team at DOT the last few years, including our recent build out from 23rd down to 21st Street as part of Broadway Visioning, we're looking at the kind of next iteration of Broadway Vision. And looking at two blocks, 25th to 26th Street and 26th to 27th Street, as Jessica just alluded to build on the success of the open streets and open dining programs. We really want to add some public amenities to these blocks and really make them temporary pedestrian first plazas for this fall. A lot of variables moved around this last few months, but we're looking at October for the opportunity here to really implement what will be two very temporary public spaces up in Nomad with usual, plaza footprint of materials, planters at the edges to harden the edges, movable tables and chairs, granite blocks to reinforce the closure, as well as some light programming throughout. The outdoor dining on both blocks will remain. And will have hopefully very little impact on their success since it has gone so well. But we hear time and again that Broadway is sticky and people want to spend time on it. And people are taking seats where they can find them, which can even be a curbside. But we want to offer a more amenable public space to between the 25th and 26th and 26th and 27th for a few weeks this fall. And start pretty quickly, start this week by implementing this. And also to give us a chance to really gauge how these two blocks operate in advance of future SIP or Broadway Vision opportunities come next year in the future. So I'm happy to answer any questions, but I want to turn it back over to DOT to provide some further context to projects both in Flatiron and further uptown.
Beautiful.
Sorry, I was going to say I'm going to hand it over to my colleague Irene to talk about the district.
Hello. So last spring, we presented a plaza share street proposal for Broadway between 40th, 40 and 38. Since then, we have fully pedestrianized the plaza block between 50 and 39 and installed a shared street treatment on the following block. due to a Con Ed reconstruction, we couldn't really complete the whole SIP treatment on the Plaza block during the first round of markings and gravel. But the Garment District Alliance came to the rescue as usual and installed one of their beautiful asphalt arcs that you can see in the picture, where the gravel is, the new gravel is planned. Next week, we're gonna come in again and just finish the gravel installation and finish the rest of the work, which is not only the gravel, but on this block, we're also missing the bike lanes, green paint, and wayfinding. We estimate finishing this project by mid-October. Next. So one of the discussion points during the previous presentation of this project was the treatment of the bike lane on the 3938 block. Emily, if you can, yeah, sure. So I don't know if you remember, but we showed 2 proposals for that block because we were, just really exploring that conversation about bike lanes on Broadway and the different iterations that we could have depending on the location and block. And we showed a one-way bike lane and also a 2-way bike lane proposal. So the committee ended up supporting the first option and we went with it. And now that most of the project, not all of it, of course, but most of it is on the ground, we went back there and did a few spot check counts to observe how people are using the bike lane and identify patterns and trends. This is also in response to a request by the committee. So what we saw on the ground was a well-used bike lane. Not only cyclists are using it, and we also have seen other forms of micromobility on the bike lane. On average, 70% of the bike lane users were going northbound, and half of those were actually going up because they wanted to get to the city bike dock that is on the Church Street block. And then also another thing that we saw was when we were there, that a lot of the cyclists that were getting off 39th Street to Broadway, making that left turn, they were actually crossing through the plaza sort of as a shortcut. We worked with the Garment District Alliance and Jonathan on finding a solution for this problem. And he actually, Emily, I think you're sharing your screen. Hi. So we found a solution to this problem and added a few planters on strategic locations to deter some of that behavior, and it worked. I was there today for an hour or so, and I didn't see a single one doing biking through the plaza, so that's good. And then I think that's pretty much it for the Garment District location. Then we have the Times Square North location where we have more updates to share on this one. So this project was a slowdown due to a few things. The first thing was the installation of accessibility improvements at 49th Street. So these were improvements to assist blind or low vision pedestrians in crossing the street. And that took some time. So we had to put that whole project on hold, and it didn't really get in during that first round of markings and gravel. The other thing that happened was that we also had a Ferris wheel on the 48-47 block this summer. So we also stopped to accommodate that celebratory activation. The slowdown was really an opportunity for us to be more responsive to the feedback that we got from this committee last time that we were here in April. We heard that people were asking for more pedestrianization of Broadway. We sat down with the Times Square Alliance to discuss opportunities. And what we decided to do was to just really seize the moment and revisit the design now that we have to wait a lot of it longer to install, and look for a proposal that would allow the extension of the Times Square plazas and a block north. So we've changed the implementation timeline to accommodate this change, change in the scope of work. So the following weeks, we're going to be finishing the slow Church Street blocks between 50 and 48. And then now what we're doing is thinking about how can we implement a plaza block on that last block. So what you see on the screen is the proposal. So the goal is to have that network of shared streets, and then at the very end have the pedestrian plaza, so an extension of the Times Square plazas. And then what we're doing here is we're rerouting the traffic, the cars and the cyclists to on 48 to 7th Avenue. There's a bike lane right now in the process of being installed. That is a protected bike lane on 7th Avenue. And this is a great way to connect cyclists to it, because instead of going counter flow like they currently are at 47, we are making sure that they're moving with the rest of the traffic volume. So let's do a zoom in quickly just for the committee to take a look. So with this project, as with many of our other projects, we are always thinking about emergency vehicle access and also access to signage trucks that are providing services to the adjacent buildings. As I said before, the 48 block between 7th Avenue and Broadway, we are proposing a redesign of that block. That's what you're seeing on your screen. So it's not only the pedestrianization of that last block between 47 and 48, but also redesigning that block between 7th Avenue and Broadway at 48. And what you see on the screen is a protected bike lane to reroute cyclists to 7th Avenue to the protected bike lane there. Next, I think that, you know, this is, so what I wanted to talk to you about is that we know that vehicles are going to be, with a proposal like this, are going to be trying to reach 7th Avenue earlier, and those that are going to go down Broadway are going to be, you know, they're doing it for local access. However, we do know that our drivers are still taking that right turn, 47, and we want to make sure that we're planning for those drivers and that we take their needs into account. So we have pre-pandemic traffic counts that we did, and we have shown you before. And the next slides are going to show it, they're right there. We did some traffic counts during the past couple of months during the pandemic to see what was happening on the ground, which we saw like a reduction. However, now the theater district is reopening. So the whole things here in this district are shifting and changing. What we want to do is to go back and take traffic counts again with the current conditions on the ground. So we can go back and design a project that also properly mitigate any of the potential negative impacts. So the other thing that we want to do is also make sure that we are managing pedestrians in this area, which we already know is a big challenge here. When you can see here the modal split, we are seeing like the similar numbers and proportions right now on the ground anecdotally. So we know that this is still a thing that we need to manage. And what we're going to be doing is focusing on design that supports management of pedestrians and cyclists in this area. And then I think that's, let's go down the next slides. Okay, so for Times Square, the next steps are finishing the shared street blocks, right? Now in October. And then what we want to do with your support is to keep the 47-48 block as a plaza in this year, and then come back next year and implement a full project. So the idea is this year have what we're calling a stop-gap condition, where we have it pedestrianized, but we maintain the bike lane connection as it is to 47th Avenue, 47th Street, and then it goes down to goes east to 7th Avenue, but then come back next year and then do a full project where we reroute at 48, and then we do a full treatment, SIP treatment, with the goal of doing all the traffic counts and making sure we are designed for the conditions on the ground. So now Emily is going to conclude this presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Irene. So one other quick thing to note for the Times Square plazas is that we are in early conversations with the Times Square Alliance about managing their spaces in their entirety, so beyond the bow tie, and really thinking holistically about 41st Street up to 53rd Street, which is the the length of Times Square plazas and working with them on a major concession ULURP that would allow them to manage the entirety of the spaces under DOT's plaza concession agreement. So we're in early conversations now, and that will be something that DOT and the Alliance and Department of City Planning will be coming back to you with further details in the coming months. Wanted to make sure you know that's on its way. So next steps very quickly. After tonight, the Flatiron is looking to install their pop-up plaza and test out more public space in their district. We'll be doing our ongoing outreach with MOPED and the visually impaired community. We'd be looking for a full board vote on the 4-7 to 4-8 block, plaza block in Times Square. We would then, as Irene said, continue to collect our most recent traffic volumes and come back to you to share kind of a finalized design and bike configuration for that block. And then we would continue our community outreach and engagement about designs of additional blocks of the Broadway corridor moving forward. And Times Square, specifically that 4-7 to 4-8 block, would be put in our kind of spring, summer season implementation of next year. And so with that, we'll open it up to questions.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I'm trying to, there was a lot here, so I'm trying to distill it down to some of the updates that you've been providing about past installations, what you obviously have kind of planned for the future, which we appreciate getting you know, early warning on, and what, if anything, you're asking for action on this month. Where you refer to the full board meeting on October 14th, that's action we would need to take tonight, and that's specifically, you're seeking specifically action or support on the plaza block between 47 and 48?
Correct. Yeah, we're looking for a resolution for the full closure of Broadway on that block.
And can you toggle back or otherwise remind us, you know, you show us the before and after one more time just to refresh everybody's, once again, really helpful to get all that historical context and plans for the future, but now sort of just zooming in on what we're looking at this evening. We don't actually
have a before slide, but it looks somewhat similar to the 4-8 to 4-9 block, where there's a single vehicular lane that chicanes and allows vehicles through, and the bike lane is maintained and continues the contraflow on 47th Street.
So you've got a single lane that chicanes from 48 to 47, and all that traffic is essentially required to turn right onto 47 after that.
Correct.
So all that traffic would be otherwise redirected to turn left onto 48, and if it intended to make it to 47, it would have to take a right and then another right.
Yes, with one exception to say that, you know, part of the larger plan and creating more of the shared slow blocks along Broadway, we expect that vehicles that are trying just to get to 7th Avenue may turn off Broadway earlier and kind of not go through the shared local network. And that, yeah, there just might be some vehicle
You're hoping and
diversions.
anticipating they might turn right at 49 instead.
Or just earlier upstream, basically.
Okay. Okay.
And sorry, so and as Irene said, we have a certain analysis for our pre-pandemic volumes, which we're anticipating right now is kind of a worst case scenario. The recent counts we took are very low, and so we'd like to do one more set of counts with the theater district reopened that will give us a better sense of vehicles on the ground now. And that will help us calibrate the signal timings that we need, particularly at 48th and 7th Avenue.
Thanks. Now that we have a more specific sense of what we're considering tonight, can you show us the pre-pandemic counts one more time?
Absolutely. So here you can see pre-pandemic, our AM peak volume on this block was 145 vehicles, and the PM peak was 234 vehicles using this block of Broadway from 47 to 48.
Okay. Thank you. With that, I'd like to give the opportunity to members of the committee to ask questions. Once again, we got a lot of information here, but it seems we are being asked specifically about closing this one block to traffic. Noah, did you have a question?
Yeah. So my question is for bikes trying to go west. Is there still going to be a bike lane between 48 and 47, or would they be required to or suggested to turn right at 49th, or because I don't really see the bike lane in this drawing. So can you talk more about that, please?
Sure, absolutely. So our entire bike network along Broadway is kind of a series of local access for cyclists, and then we take them kind of off Broadway and on to the next closest protected avenue lane for cyclists that are moving through. So again, that's what we've done at Times Square. And so when we did the plazas the first time around. And so here the idea is that we're just simply moving that movement one block to the north. So cyclists would travel along the Broadway corridor, protected in a shared street environment. And instead of going to the protected lane on 7th Avenue, contraflow at 47th, if they want to continue southbound, their destination is not one of these buildings or the plaza, they would continue kind of in a protected lane on 48th with traffic, and then they would connect to the 7th Avenue protected bike lane.
Okay. I guess I'm just a little concerned that bikes would kind of just keep going through to 47th, and that might be a problem. And not go all the way left, right, and then back on 47.
Yeah, I think generally, as you guys are probably all well aware, we definitely have challenges with the bike lane that goes through Herald Square from 3-4 to 3-5. That's a lane we've designed a couple different times, but the ultimate goal there is when we get to a capital project, we can also move that lane kind of out of the plaza and onto the avenue, because ultimately, when you have a really kind of robust pedestrian space, cyclists who are looking to go through quickly, there's just a real conflict in speeds. So again, I think cyclists that dismount and kind of interact with the plaza, or just have a limited amount of cyclists, and really encourage folks to take the 7th Avenue connection. And a huge part of what we're trying to do to ensure that we get as much compliance with the 7th Avenue connection is make sure that the lane is protected the entire way, so folks feel comfortable taking that route.
Okay, thank you.
I'll admit that I frankly didn't realize that we were being presented with a short-term redesign tonight for this particular block, and so didn't really have the opportunity to do any advance refamiliarizing myself with the block and its particular situations in advance of tonight. You showed a timetable that has us weighing in as a full board this month with a full board vote on October 14th. What is your intended or desired implementation for this block, and does it have outside considerations that you're for in terms of a time frame?
So we know that we can't fully implement the block this season. We're running out of warm weather. So we plan to implement the full design next spring. So what we were hoping to do, as Ira and I mentioned, is if the committee and the board ultimately votes to support, we would continue to keep this block closed and pedestrianized and have a kind of short-term stopgap plan working with the Times Square Alliance on furniture, maybe some paint, some sort of stopgap layout until we can kind of come in the spring and implement the gravel fully. If you guys feel like you ultimately need more time to review, I mean, that's something we can certainly discuss, because again, it's really finalizing the design and all of the signal timing for a spring 2022 implementation.
Okay, thank you. I'm concerned about pulling the trigger on something that that I wasn't necessarily didn't know was coming and haven't heard, yet ourselves yet from Times Square Alliance on. But I would, but on the other hand, it is sort of small and a trial sort of balloon for longer term plans. So I'm particularly curious to hear thoughts from other members of the committee. But first, let me know questions. Sam, I know you can't raise your hand as a co-host, but it sounded like you either had a question or a comment about what we're seeing.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's not so much of a question, but I think I'm with EJ and my concerns about voting on this straight off. We just had the Ferris wheel. I work on that block. I'm a tenant of a theater, a Broadway theater, between Broadway 47th and 8th Avenue. And the Ferris wheel and subsequent curtain up event, I think shows some of the merits of blocking off that piece and turning it into a pedestrian plaza. I think there was sort of general consensus that isn't inherently a bad idea. I just feel like it's hard to vote for a potentially permanent change at this point while things are still shaking out. I still haven't even heard feedback from the Ferris wheel in general. And I know that most of the neighborhood is sort of supportive of this proposal, as I would be, but if there's a way of actually not voting on this proposal now and separating it out from the other two and considering, over the next couple of months, some of the implications of the Ferris wheel, some of the events that are returning to Times Square and some of the new traffic patterns, I would be more inclined to be comfortable to support something like this. Again, I think there was general support in the past for closing this block. I just feel like this might be a bit of a rush to do that so soon after the Ferris wheel, which basically was there, closed it off. If that makes sense.
Hi, this is Kimberly. I think it makes sense then maybe if there aren't objections from the committee, and apologies if it wasn't clear in advance that we were looking at a long-term proposal for this block. But if there aren't objections for us to continue the sort of temporary treatment and continue to evaluate it and then come back with or for you guys to revisit a vote in support or whoever it ends up being. The option.
I personally would be very comfortable with that. I think temporarily it's working. I just think that it's still a little bit early to get perhaps everyone else on board. I'm there every day, so I see it, but I would be inclined to sit tight and let everyone take a look and get overall support.
Does that make sense, Emily?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we can, obviously we want to be very kind of careful with all of our kind of CREA and environmental review rules. And so want to make sure we're not keeping the street closed longer than we're able. And ultimately having the board vote on a plaza designation allows us to move forward with those pieces. But yes, we can continue to work with you and find the right time to come back with updated information.
I think it sounds good to me, at least, to again continue the temporary treatment for a short period of time and maybe return, not indefinitely, but maybe return to us next month, which would just give us a couple more weeks to consider, what's being proposed in a more permanent fashion here, and also, as Sam said, to hear a little bit more feedback about how things have been going the last few weeks. I'm certainly open to that. Maki, did you have a question or kind of comment?
I do. Thank you, EJ. So just to confirm I'm understanding what's being presented here, because it was a little bit of a last minute. So the second bullet on this particular slide is the temporary condition that will be continued throughout the winter, if I'm understanding this correctly.
That's correct.
Thank you. That being said, my question, it is really more of an ask, is if it's possible to do the pedestrian counts at that same corner, because my concern is, because the plaza exists as it is, and that shaded area on Broadway has a city bike rack that is quite large, that at that point where you start turning the bike lane onto 48th Street, you're going to have pedestrians having to decide if they want to cross a bike lane that's turning or walk right into the city bike containment center, where people are backing bikes in, locking bikes forward, and so forth. So if you wouldn't mind, if it's possible to add that as a pedestrian count area for the future, that would be really helpful, I think, to inform future decisions. Thanks.
Sure.
Great, thanks, Maki. So yeah, it sounds like that would be very preferable to us if you were able to come back to us with this proposal next month, so that we have a little bit, again, a little bit of time to think about it and to collect kind of feedback from the community. And it sounds like maintaining the status quo for a couple more weeks is doable. And again, the intention here is not to put this off indefinitely. So Kimberly, Emily, if that sounds okay to you, I think that's the direction to go in here. Certainly would still give any folks on the committee or members of the public who want to ask any questions the opportunity to do so. It sounds like that's okay from DOT's perspective.
Yes, yeah, that would work well. And yeah, we'll be able to come back with a much more fleshed out proposal, particularly with the bike lane and signal timing design, because we'll have updated counts then. So that sounds good to us.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. We'll look forward to that presentation, and appreciate what is now kind of advance notice of that this evening. Any other questions from members of the committee on the update and kind of early proposal that we've seen so far tonight, but understanding that we'll be getting a return visit a month from now about specific to this 47 to 48th Street Plaza. Not seeing any other hands at this point. Any comments or questions from any members of the public? Please feel free to use the raise hand feature. Yeah, Charlie, you can unmute.
Hi, I have a couple of things. I'd like some more clarification on the audible pedestrian signals, if they're still going to be implemented, and what the timeline is going to be on that, because I wasn't too clear, I'm afraid. It does concern me that a lot of what's being proposed, and in general, with these types of projects, is landscape changes to the New York City landscape, right? And we have a lot of people living in our communities with disabilities, especially mobility impairments. And my worry is, even though I'm glad that the DOT is reaching out to the Mayor's Office for People with Disabilities and set a manner, I think, for people who are blind over there, I do wonder if the message is really going out to the whole disabled community in New York City, because not everyone, knows about the Mayor's Office for People with Disabilities, and not everyone lives in Status Manor, of course. So there's plenty of other people who might not be getting the message. Is there anything we can do to do a public campaign, maybe put some sort of public commercial out on television or radio to let people know when these types of projects come along, about shared spaces or pedestrian plazas, about ways of getting in contact? And also, is the meeting on October the 1st at the Mayor's Office for People with Disability going to be live streamed, or maybe be on Zoom? Because I believe some of these public meetings are still in the phase of being on Zoom because of COVID, and some people with disabilities might be afraid to go in person because of their immune issues. And one quick thing is, again, not everyone with a disability has family or friends to help them. I'm very grateful to the president of the Times Square Alliance, Mr. Harris, who helped me and did stick by his word of giving me assistance and help me from my access ride taxi to the Ferris wheel. But that's the thing. These plazas, even though they're good and they're really good for the city, they do present a barrier to people who don't have assistance or don't have ways of navigating, and it becomes like a desert, and it makes them excluded from enjoying the arts and of New York City. And that's the important thing, is to have the arts be inclusive for everyone, so people with disabilities can enjoy, like everyone else, these wonderful activities. And also, one last thing very quickly, is these outdoor dining spaces. They're good, but I would like the community board to think about, some sidewalks are not always appropriate for outdoor dining, and it does narrow the sidewalk quite a bit. People have to go in single files, and I do worry about people in wheelchairs and how they navigate sidewalks with these narrowed sidewalks because of the outdoor dining things.
Yeah, thanks, Charlie. We're going to try to give DOT an opportunity to respond to the issues that you raised specific to this block in Times Square. Emily, did you want to respond to any of what was just kind of brought up?
Sure, absolutely. All really good points. So the APS signals are, and Jessica Irene confirmed, but that work is complete now at the blocks in Times Square.
It was not implemented in all blocks. It was triggered at 49th, and it is completed at 49th. Yeah.
Yep. So the meeting with Moped is Moped's monthly meeting with a whole host of disability organizations and advocates. So part of that meeting and part of what we'll be talking about is what is a shared street, the agency's kind of design considerations for people with visual impairments. And we can certainly be asking about additional ways to get the word out and connect with larger groups throughout the city. This isn't a group that's localized to Flatiron. It is a citywide group. So hopefully that will yield some good connections, and we can certainly keep you posted with kind of additional outreach and engagement as we advance this conversation.
Okay, thanks very much, Charlie, and thanks, Emily, as well. Seeing no other hands from members of the public, I think that we really appreciate all the updates you provided tonight. We appreciate your willingness to come back in a month's time with this specific proposal, where I think we'll be able to give it kind of much more due consideration than we would have been able to tonight without really knowing it was coming. But you know, much appreciated. We'll look forward to that next month. And unless you folks at DOT have anything else you wanted to update us on tonight, I guess we'll let you go, and we'll look forward to seeing you next month.
Sounds great. Thank you so much, everybody.
Okay, thank you. And that concludes our agenda for the evening. Thank you to all the members of the committee and members of the public who are in attendance, and to DOT for sticking around to the end. We will see you all later. Thanks very much.